Hey guys, Knox and Dad from 7th Hour Films back again with Doctor Who Classic. Last time around we had The Invisible Enemy. What was that one about?
I vaguely remember the Doctor being inside somebody's body, microscopic.
His own, technically.
That's right, he was a clone.
Yeah.
Okay. But again, quite honestly, because there's so much stuff going on right now, you'll have to fill me again on what was happening, because other than the Fantastic Voyage, I've pretty much forgotten it.
Yeah. So, there was a virus on Titan, one of the moons of Saturn, and but the virus was alive and wanted to possess people and conquer humans. And the Doctor and Leela were cloned because the Doctor was infected. The clones went in, got out the nucleus, but then it actually came out and they grew him to larger size. And then they eventually found a cure based on Leela and her instinct and her way of not thinking about things. And then I think they just blew up the nucleus at the end. Also K9.
K9, that's right.
Yeah.
And remember, the nucleus ultimately ended up looking like a giant shrimp or a cockroach or something. It had the 6 arms like Alpha Centauri.
Yeah, pretty much. And yeah, that was pretty much it. And the big takeaway was now we have K9. So, I don't know, actually, like, I thought about it, like, I don't know if, like, K9, like, how much of a companion K9 will be. Like, I'm thinking, like, if we go literally anywhere else that's not in space, I don't know if K9 will always be sort of tagging along, or if he's just sort of a bring him up when we need him sort of companion. Because, yeah, you know, if you go back to, like, Victorian London or Renaissance Italy, as we've been before, having a talking metal dog rolling around may not work out very well.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I could be entirely wrong. Honestly, I'm not sure why I say some things with such authority when I haven't seen the episodes. So...
And part of the reason I'm forgetting everything is I'm in the process of learning my lines for A Territorial Christmas Carol, so my mind is scattered.
And it's fighting against your memorization of the book already.
Yes.
So.
Yes.
But yeah, so today we are on Image of the Fendahl, which I think, again, I'm going to say this with authority, like I have any, I think this is the last script by Robert Holmes. So I think somebody said that, or like this is the sort of turning point in the Fourth Doctor's era. So yeah, I don't know. Should be interesting. I assume there will be an image of the Fendahl. I don't know if it's like the picture of Dorian Gray or something, but knowing this show, the title probably has nothing to do with anything except there will be something called a Fendahl. So,
well, the name sounds only vaguely familiar. I'm wondering if it's like an old Scandinavian legend or perhaps a Celtic legend of some kind. I know I'm thinking of Fenric in one instance, but the Dahl sounds Scandinavian to me. So again, it's somewhere in the back of the historical memories, back in the deep dark recesses of my brain. The name sounds familiar, but I couldn't tell you why.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's pretty much that. You got anything else?
I got nothing.
All right. Then why don't we just go ahead and jump right into Image of the Fendahl. Here we go.
Alas, poor Yorick.
Well, don't just sit there, Eustace.
I've been in fogs like that up in East Anglia. The Entertainer was sung by Scott Joplin, a jazz composer. It was very popular around this time because it was the theme song to The Sting, which was an Oscar-winning movie, if I recall. I realize you're a scientist, but when a skull starts glowing, that is the time to turn around and run.
Switching to main computer
It's
control.
Kingdom of the Crystal Skull.
I can call K9 here if I want to. You call the TARDIS she?
Never.
You do? I've heard you. Called it she just a moon ago. And another thing, it is quite clear to me that you cannot control this old machine either.
There's not one single part of it that I haven't adjusted or repaired at some time or another.
Don't cry about it.
Furthermore, I'm in complete and constant control of her.
Well, I don't know that part.
Complete and constant. What is it? What's wrong?
Well, they both got new outfits.
Earth?
Your ancestors have a talent for self-destruction which borders on genius.
Listen, Doctor, I do not like the way you keep talking about my ancestors.
I like your new dress.
Thank you.
It's weird that she bothered to do her hair, though. And newspapers are such a hassle to maneuver. I don't know how you do it.
Just have to learn.
We have been working all night, haven't we, Max? We have only just finished.
Maximilian Stahl? German, perhaps?
The results for the
It's a corpse by the wood.
What sort of corpse?
A dead one. What other sort is there?
Male or female?
Oh, male.
Get on to London. Tell Hartman I want his security team here within 2 hours. Tell him I want the best men we have and I want them armed. Then I shall want you to do a post-mortem on that body.
They're literally 5 feet away from you. I think they heard that.
He came armed and silent.
If you're a doctor, you shouldn't let her wander around loose. You could do someone a damage.
He was not hunting us?
No. Would you like a jelly baby?
You both escaped from somewhere, haven't you?
Definitely.
They do say he's one of the richest men in the world. You wouldn't think so to look at him, scruffy devil. They say he made his money out of electronics. But that don't seem likely, because he ain't Japanese. No.
Well, I'll be going now, Professor. You can tell Dr. Fendelman I'll come back when the others is gone. I don't know what the likes of he. There isn't a dog born as it attacked me, boy. They got more sense than most people.
Well, that wasn't the least bit suspicious.
Cheaper than oil. What on earth's he playing at?
You are impressed?
Oh, I don't know. I always say if you've seen one jukebox, you've seen them all. This is archaeology.
You call this archaeology?
This is the ultimate archaeology, Adam.
I shall kill him.
No.
Why not?
You'll upset the dog. Listen, Leela, you simply must stop attacking people.
Why?
Because you'll get us into trouble.
Do not worry, Doctor. I shall protect you.
What? You'll protect me. Come on. We'll circle around the back.
Crazy as a
I mean, teach her some, like, the Venusian Aikido and just knock somebody out.
With that electronic fruit machine he's got down there.
Alrighty then.
Let's see who the doctor is. Nope.
Alrighty. That's part one.
It's a nice setup. It was kind of slow, but I mean, they're setting up the mystery of it. But it's all very easy to follow.
Yeah. I'll give them this. There is, I assume that the skull is the Fendahl. I assume. Of course, also the guy's name is Fendahl. Men. But if that is the case, if that is the Fendahl, and there is an image over it, that's more than I can say for most episodes. So I'll give it credit for that. So,
but you got all the different parts set up. You've got the German industrialist turned scientist who appears to be the bad guy. His unwitting assistant, Max. You have the two archaeologists, one of whom seems to be possessed by the skull. And then you land the doctor and Leela in the middle of that. Plus you have a bumbling security guard, or security head or whatever, and the old cook who already sets up to be a witch of some kind. So
Yeah.
this is probably the most of a mystery we've seen probably since the demons.
Yeah. And I will say, because I'm sure somebody might bring it up, because we've previously gone on record as saying, oh, don't quit going to these manors in the countryside or something. It's been a little while, so
Yeah.
I'll grant them it's been a little while. At the very least, it's the first time Leela's gone to one of them.
Yeah.
So it's been a little while. It is still a little slow, and I can see Dr. Fendelman being our stock generic evil scientist guy, but willing to give it a chance.
Yeah.
We'll see how it goes forward.
I'm intrigued. I want to know where it's going from here.
I'm curious about this skull that's 12 billion years old when it really shouldn't be.
Yeah.
So, or 12 million. I don't remember if it's.
I think he said million.
It might have been
But
million.
I'm trying to remember, and again, UK fans, please don't quote me on this. Million and billion in the United Kingdom are different from million and billion here in the United States.
Oh, yeah.
For us, 1,000 million is a billion, but I think a billion is something different, or a million is something different. So, again, because theoretically speaking, human beings should only be, human beings as we understand them now, according to modern archaeology, should probably only be about 2 million years old.
Yeah.
But even so, the earliest upright hominids would still only go back about 8 million years.
Yeah.
So, again, as a historian, I'm kind of intrigued by this, going, okay, so you're talking about something that possessed one of these hominids long before they should have ever been even walking upright.
Yeah. But it does still have just a sort of similar location and character to, what was the one with the plants? The Seeds of Doom or something?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And something outside the house that goes around to kill somebody. It definitely reminds me of that, but there's just enough different that I'll see where it's going.
Even vaguely reminiscent of Day of the Daleks, if I recall. Wasn't there a spooky ghost or something projection in that?
Maybe. I don't remember.
Because they were coming from the future back to the present to stop something from happening in the past, which would change the future. Was that Day of the Daleks?
That was, but I don't know if there was something like that specifically.
I seem to recall that there was some kind of projection that people thought was a ghost or a poltergeist or something.
Maybe
not.
Oh,
it's been a while.
It has. That was 6 seasons ago at this point. So.
And then we left with someone shooting at Leela.
Well.
And that appeared to be a shotgun, so you would think some of that scatter shot would. She moved just in time.
Come on, you can do it.
La Mort. The Hanged Man. Oh, it's Mr. Moss. And no signs of blast marks on the door or wall. See the thing hanging on the wall there? That's a bed warmer.
I didn't know it were you.
Well, you
We
know
used to
now.
use those in France when we lived there.
You was trespassing.
How many deaths have there been?
Deaths?
Like this?
2. Now look!
No, you look.
Talk about your golden girl.
Oh.
And we just stand there looking at it dispassionately.
Yeah.
You got a woman glowing and what appears to be a giant serpent.
What was it? They look like embryo Fendahl to me.
Gesundheit.
A creature from my own mythology. Supposed to have perished when the 5th planet broke up. At least so they said.
A creature from mythology? Do you know what you're talking about?
But you saw it. If it survived 12 million years, its energy reserves must be enormous.
12 million? Why did you say 12 million?
What? Well, about 12 million, that's when the 5th planet broke up. There are 4,000 million people here on your planet. And if I'm right, within a year, there'll be just one left alive. Just one.
4,000 million. That's $1 billion.
Some sort of wandering Armageddon.
Take him away, lock him up somewhere.
This is the way you treat all your house guests.
Only the uninvited ones whom I suspect of murder.
But she needs help!
Take him away!
It's one of those kind of stories. It doesn't work on wood.
I said you ought to be. Oh, God.
I must go now.
Hang on.
My people need me.
Please.
The old ways?
Yeah, the old superstitions and that. See, he called her Mother Taylor. No, that ain't 'cause he likes her. That's the old religion.
The Druids.
Look, there's something nasty going on.
I'm sure the doctor can help you. Oh, he's very difficult sometimes, but he has great knowledge and gentleness.
Doesn't work on wood, does it?
Nope.
But that's a metal door handle.
When Fendelman offered me unlimited funds, I jumped at the chance. I owe him a great deal.
That didn't sound the least bit suspicious.
When the time comes, we must be 12.
We know you lead the coven now, but we know the old ways. 13 be the number.
Witches and warlocks.
You are looking very pale, my dear. Perhaps you have been working too hard. I will ask Stahl to look in on you later.
That sounds like a bad idea.
Well, it seems now that Fendelman is not the bad guy, but Steil is.
Yeah, he doesn't know that yet.
12th century.
You know, you need a nice, good, solid textbook. Break it.
Knock it off its pedestal.
Oh, yeah.
If it's that old, it would shatter. Now, I was about to comment the fact that we haven't said much during this episode,
Oh, yeah.
but that's because it's a very quiet episode. There's not a whole lot of action that went on, and yet we have progressed the plot. We've seen the turn. Fendelman just apparently wants to establish the fact that humans are not actually from Earth.
Yeah.
And somehow Stahl is with the old ones who are either trying to stop the return of whatever the skull is, or they're trying to facilitate the return of the skull.
Yeah. I think they're trying to bring the creature back, specifically.
Yeah.
And, yeah, Fendelman is definitely, he was just, curious about this and how far it went of humanity's ancestors and their place before Earth. But now he's realized he's in over his head. So that's good, because, we started off saying, all right, here's our sort of stuck evil scientist guy, but the dynamic just kind of keeps changing, which is interesting.
Yeah.
So,
and again, as I mentioned, Fendahl, like Heimdall from the Thor trilogy. It is, by the way, Heimdall, not Heimdall. But that's Norse, and this seems to be Celtic. I mean, this goes back to the old Irish and Scottish, and the Celts are probably also in Wales. They were for a while in Europe, and if I recall correctly, mostly scattered to the British Isles just to get away from the burgeoning civilizations like the Greeks and the Romans. Again, don't quote me on that. But yeah, when they keep talking about the old ways, that's very much the Irish and Scottish Celtic traditions, if I recall correctly.
yeah. Although the Doctor also says that this is from his mythology, so I would assume that would be the system that Gallifrey is in. Yeah. So he also said they're from the 5th planet. So I don't know what planet, Gallifrey and like Karn are, but this must be a new one where they've got these weird worm.
This is at the Alpha 5.
Yeah, these strange worm anus creatures. I don't know. They're kind of weird, but whatever. That's not the point. So, and hey, they look a hell of a lot better than the last thing we had. So,
now the nice thing too about that, once again, even though she was glowing and it wasn't the greatest special effect there, but the image of, I'm assuming this is the Fendahl, but that image was somewhat obscured. I think if it had been in sharp focus, we would have gone, oh, well, that's really kind of silly looking. But the fact that it was moving and it was kind of blurred out, you're kind of going, ooh, that's kind of creepy looking. So we've said all along that because of the amount of budgets that they had, that their technology should have been kept mostly off camera and only on camera at the very minimum in order to keep the suspense up.
Yeah. It also helps that it's not like a bright color. Like that was probably another problem with the Nucleus, was that it was such a bright blue and white color. So yeah. I also wonder, because this is if this is part of Gallifreyan mythology, if it's sort of like when they did Pyramids of Mars, and it's like, well, yes, you have Horus and Osiris and Sutekh, but they're all from space. They just happen to finish their battle in Egypt, which is where the Egyptian gods come from. Yeah. So,
and we've mentioned before, this is a very popular theme back in the 70s. The Chariots of the Gods came out during this time period.
Yeah.
I'm glad you were awake, Thea. I want you to understand why I brought you here. You are the medium through which the ancient power of this place is focused.
You're a petri dish, Thea.
What are you doing?
Wonder if that's his pickup line.
She's slipping away.
Here, just a minute. That ain't the way to make a fruitcake.
Mrs. Tyler!
Unlike you, I am not a crude lout, Colby. The grimoires do not impress me. Mrs. Tyler's paranormal gifts and the race memories she draws on, these were the signposts on the road to power.
Spare us the after-dinner speech.
If I remember correctly, a grimoire is like a cookbook. Maybe a book to prepare potions and things.
I trusted him.
He's off his nut.
And I'm going to end up just as dead as you.
That's why there's no record of the planet.
Why?
That impression is produced by a time loop.
Time loop?
Yes, a time loop. All memory of the planet's been erased by a circle of time, making it and its records invisible. Only a Time Lord could do that.
That's very clever.
That's criminal.
I have been used. You are being used. Mankind has been used!
That sounded like a shot.
You don't say. Jeez.
You murdering lunatic.
Ugh.
Doctor, the dream, I can't move.
My legs. I can't move my legs.
Look. Look.
Shoot it!
You got a gun full of salt, shoot it.
Yeah.
Now, once again, let me say, it's very slow paced, but that's in keeping with trying to build the mystery. I mean, they're not padding it in any way, shape, or form,
Yeah.
but I also don't see how they could have sped it up.
Yeah. And it's one of those things. We're recording this on October the 30th. It would have worked out as a Halloween episode, like Horror of Fang Rock. Yeah. So yeah, it's just that I know that by the time this goes up, it'll be well into November, but close enough. So,
and again, from a director's standpoint, at that last shot there, I would have had it in shadow completely, and then just very briefly pull it out into the light before you cut away with the stinger.
Yeah. So, all right. I was slightly confused though about the fifth planet.
I think he was seeming to say that it may have been there, it may not have been there, I'm not exactly sure, but there was a time loop which either kept up the presence of it or the non-presence of it. And again, it was, one time listening through, it was kind of hard to understand.
Yeah.
I don't know that that's necessarily going to be germane to the plot, but the idea was that there was something suspicious going on with the fifth planet, although we haven't found it. I'm sure they'll explain it, or at least give some, cursory explanation in this final episode.
Yeah, because he also mentions that the only person who would be capable of that is a Time Lord. So is that to imply the Fendahl is a Time Lord, or was it being aided by another Time Lord? The other thing I thought is, if the skull itself, perhaps the skull is Time Lord, because, in a lot of ways they don't actually differentiate from humans. So I also thought, it's kind of a degraded skull. Could be the Master for all we know. I don't know. Or, just another sort of Time Lord, but I'm just really not sure. So... Okay, so the alien has a sense of style.
No! Don't do that! Don't do that!
Lady Squid. Ugh.
This is not how it should be!
Good job.
It's almost like a Greek goddess statue.
Well...
All right, Dad.
You know something, John? There's going to come a time when I'll be too old for this sort of thing.
Get him out of here as soon as you can. But if you do, don't look at her eyes. Shh. Don't look at her eyes.
She's a Medusa.
The others, we can't just leave them. You've seen her eyes. The gun. What? Get me the gun. It won't have any effect on her. It's on the altar. It's not for her. It's for me.
Shoot the skull.
Thank you.
Pull the plug.
Only down there where you just come from. But it's getting darker slowly.
Come on. Let's have a look at the one I assaulted.
So, here's a question. Would the RAF work?
Feed me, Krellborn. Feed me now. It's an Audrey too.
Yes, sodium chloride. Obviously affects the conductivity, ruins the overall electrical balance, and prevents control of localized disruption to the osmotic pressures.
Salt kills it.
I just said that. Probably the origin of throwing it over your shoulder. Come on. Now, Mrs. Tyler, I need as much salt as you can find. Rock salt, table salt. Fill as many containers as you can. Off you go.
Yes, right.
Jack, now listen very carefully. Go out into the corridor and keep watch. When you see the Fendahl, don't hang around. Give it both barrels and run. Off you go. Lena.
Yes?
Okay, wait.
So the plan is, shoot them all. With salt. I like this plan.
On a nameless planet which no longer exists, evolution went up a blind alley.
Yes.
Natural selection turned back on itself, and a creature evolved which prospered by absorbing the energy wavelengths of life itself. It ate life. All life, including that of its own kind.
Yes. In other words, the Fendahl. And then the Time Lords decided to destroy the entire planet and hid the fact from posterity.
Ah.
They're not supposed to do that sort of thing,
No.
Remember, 3 minutes.
4, sir. 3 shalt thou count. Thou shalt not count 5. 2 is right out.
Look out, Doctor!
Don't hit the camera.
Something's happened.
He switched off the scanner beam. We've got 3 minutes. Come.
One for the road. I like the touch that the music's in reverse too.
What do you do about the skull?
Oh, Go find a star about to go supernova and dump it in the vicinity.
That will destroy it?
Oh, yes. I'd better finish repairing it.
You called him him. You called him him!
I can call K9 him if I want to. He's my dog. Aren't you, K9?
Okay.
All right. There's a weird ending scene there, but that's all right.
Well, I like the idea of the implosion.
Yeah.
And
Nice, cleans things up.
But again, like you said, missing priories are going to be hard to explain.
Yeah. And, the mass number of dead people in this one.
Well, of course, they'd all be disappeared in the implosion, one would expect.
Yeah.
But the remaining scientist, what was his name?
Colby.
Colby. He'll say, there was an experiment gone wrong and it imploded, so.
Yeah. Okay, so they did clear up the whole thing with the Time Lords, is that it was specifically that the Fendahl were too much of a threat, so the Time Lords destroyed the planet and covered up any record of the planet to make sure it wouldn't come back.
Yeah.
But one of the Fendahl escaped, landed on Earth, so, and possibly theorized to have an effect on the evolution of man.
Yes.
So,
but again, that I mentioned it before, and we've talked about it in earlier episodes with earlier doctors too. That's the idea that was very popular there in the 70s, that people began to realize, for example, how was it possible for a civilization that was supposedly as primitive as the Egyptians, how could they have possibly built the pyramids? It turns out that on the entire continent of Africa, there's only one place those pyramids could have been built, where the structure beneath the sand would have actually held the weight of them. How did they know that? How did they possibly line up all four corners of the Great Pyramid at north, south, east, and west? These are all things that, by modern standards, they shouldn't have been able to do. Well, we now know that even though they were primitive in some ways, the thing is, math is very easy to figure out. I mean, the Sumerians did it, the Egyptians did it, the Greeks did it. Everybody had their own way of figuring out mathematics. And people always used to say, but the Egyptians never had the wheel. The fact that they were conquered in the Old Kingdom by the Hyksos because they had wheeled chariots. How could they have built pyramids without wheels? Well, it's very simple. In a country that is made of sand, wheels are useless. You cannot use wheels in sand. So they had basically sleds, or they put logs down that used them as rollers, like we do on modern machines today. So today, here in the 21st century, we have ultimately explained most of the mysteries of these early civilizations. But in the 1970s, we were just beginning to think about that, and that's when people said, well, the only possible way that Earth could have made this gigantic leap forward after literally millions of years of savagery and primitiveness is if aliens came down and helped us. So it fits in perfectly with the time period, and it's kind of fun to think that the Gallifreyans somehow had a hand in this, even if somewhat accidentally.
Yeah. Well, and then you get the basis. I mean, I know you said that this was, popular in the 70s, but then you get the basis for, some things today, like the show Ancient Aliens, specifically.
Yeah. Which I've never seen.
Yeah. It's, every college history professor I've ever had has denounced it and the History Channel as a whole, so...
Well, the History Channel, you have to understand, they're not putting out history. They're putting about the story of history, because regular history can be incredibly tedious, as you and I both know.
Yeah.
So, we, as storytellers, find a way to tell the story. Sometimes the myth is more important than the fact. Human beings have always been storytellers. So, I understand a pure historian looking at the History Channel and going, no, this is not history, this is not scientific, historical proof, but it does get people, I would think, because I do it, to watch something and go, oh, I'd like to know more about the Sumerians, I'd like to know more about the Egyptians. I'd like to know more about the people of Kush, or the kingdom of Mali and places like that. So that's what they're supposed to be doing. But remember, the whole point of television is to sell soap.
Yeah.
Sell advertising.
Yeah. And then going back to the idea of there must have been some sort of alien interference for stuff like the pyramids. I would assume that would also tie into old myths about Atlantis being this highly developed civilization that just happened to just implode or something one day, and none of that carries over into any of the other civilizations at that time. But the whole thing of after all this time of savagery on Earth, they cultivate this civilization and create these wonders, these pyramids, and how could they have done that without any help? Meanwhile, you could honestly say the same thing since then, that it's they built the pyramids, and then you have all this history where things they evolve here and there, here and there, here and there. Then electricity happens, and then that, even just in the last 100 years or so, how that's gone from we have this little thing that if you click on it a bunch, it'll send a message to all of this crap that we can look over here and see, which you can't see on camera because it's all behind the camera, but still. Well, we got a microphone even still. So it's here's all this stuff that have just happened in 100 years, but...
And, I mean, I used to say, when my grandmother was still alive, in her lifetime, she was born before man made the first flight, before the Wright brothers took off. And yet, within a 70-year period, we went from man not flying to putting men on the moon.
Yeah.
So, in the span of literally only 2 lifetimes, we took this gigantic leap forward. And that's the same thing on a much grander scale, where you have thousands of years of primitive life, and suddenly you get people who understand agriculture. Agriculture leads to better health. Better health leads to larger civilizations. Civilizations need a way to remember stuff, so they invent writing. Writing allows us to put down math and science and history and literature, and suddenly we have the Egyptians, we have the Sumerians, we have the Indus Valley, we have the Chinese, and from there it takes us a mere 5,000 years to get to where we are today. So people looking back and going, but it's 4,000 or 5,000 years since the pyramids were built. In the cosmic scale of mankind, that's literally a blink of an eye. So I understand. Again, the reason I kind of like this is because it does allow us to say, hey, let's look at this in the long run. Yes, that skull should not have been 12 billion years old, but it does lend credence to this whole idea of something may have happened. It may have been, a cosmic wave, a solar flare, whatever, that somehow changed the RNA or the DNA of human beings, and suddenly some particular mammals, some hominids, their brains grew larger, they began to stand upright, they figured out how to make tools, and next thing you know, we're watching Doctor Who.
Yeah, basically. So the overall thing we're saying is we like this episode. So
and watch, it'll turn out to be one that everybody hates.
I think we're good on this one.
Oh, good.
I think I heard people say that this one was really good. So, that said, I'm sure we've said something that'll piss somebody off. So,
I do remember somebody was saying that they liked IOTF, and I didn't understand what that. Now it's Image of the Fendahl.
Yeah. So, but that is always the thing, is that even if we like an episode, there's something out there. There's something out there we screwed up, but that's not the point. We're just gonna hope that didn't happen this time, or if there is something that we just need clarification.
We do this because we like it.
Yeah. So, but yeah, despite being a sort of slow burn, still a very interesting episode, and definitely, at least to me, more interesting than some of the English manor countryside stories we've had recently.
And Colby would have made an interesting companion if they decided to pick him up.
Yeah. In a way that they clearly didn't decide to pick up K9. So I was right that K9 is not, running around with them all the time. But I thought I thought like maybe he would come back in with the climax or something, but I almost wonder if maybe it was a last minute decision to keep K9, and then you've already got scripts like this that are already written, so it's like, well, throw in a little thing. He's broken. The doctor's trying to fix him, but there's no time. You have this whole adventure.
Although, with that said, that would have been an interesting, like you said, a Deus Ex Machina. He comes in at the end when the doctor says, the problem is we can't get close to the Fendahl because you look into her eyes and you're paralyzed. Well, obviously a robot's not going to be paralyzed, so they could have rigged him up to shoot salt at it, or to the Fendaline, whatever it was, so that would basically be their way of getting in and out of the cellar without, turning to stone.
Right. So,
mixing our metaphors.
Yeah. So yeah, let's see. And of course, I suppose we should be calling the Fendahl by the name it was given, which is Eustace. But that clearly didn't stick after that first episode. So she definitely doesn't look like a Eustace. So anyway, we did have the brief thing at the beginning of, can the Doctor control the TARDIS? And it's always hilarious every time he insists he can, when it's like, no, you can't. You can ask nicely to go somewhere, but it's up to the TARDIS what will happen, So that was interesting. But yeah, so we had Dr. Fendelman and the skull and this interesting sort of archaeology. And yeah, that just the whole setup was interesting. And again, I like that it's not our typical, stock generic evil scientist, because we've had too many of those on Doctor Who, even recently. So I'm glad that they switched that up. And even I guess we did have an evil scientist because it was Style, but at the same time, you don't often see an evil scientist that's also a druid, Yeah. You don't see that too often. It's like, oh, okay, we can get behind this. So, but that whole thing.
We're also making the assumption they're druids. We don't certainly want to offend any of our Druish listeners.
Yeah, exactly. So,
sorry.
Yeah, and hey,
funny, you don't look Druish.
Yeah, and hey, I'm sure they're lovely people. They built Stonehenge. It looks all right, So
I'm currently reading a series called The Iron Druid by Kevin Hearn. This is like 9 or 10 books about how he's literally fighting the pantheons of all the various old religions leading up to Ragnarok and the destruction of the world by Loki and his daughter Hel. So anyway, that's why I'm knowing a little bit more about the Celtic religions, the Druids and everything, because I've been steeped in this for about the last 5 or 6 months.
Yeah. And there was an appearance on the show Merlin where occasionally the Druids would pop up, and they seem like lovely people. Yeah. So just takes one bad apple. In this case, Style.
Maximilian Style.
Yeah, exactly.
Kind of expected him to have a German accent.
Yeah, it was really just Fendelman. So, but yeah, but all that was interesting, and it definitely, because this episode could also, you could watch this and think, well, this is very similar to the Demons, but it works because it is, well, first off, it's a lot more serious. You've got covens and witches and stuff, and also the Master, that's just a goofy time all around. But this one was a lot more serious. Although this is now our third or fourth creepy basement that we've had where you summon something, because we had the Demons, we had Planet of the Spiders. What was the other one I just thought of? I can't remember what the third one was, and then this one. So it's like there seems to be a repeating thing, is these basements where we summon things. So, but yeah, still an interesting thing. And even though it took itself, I say it took itself seriously, but then you also get Jack Tyler and his grandmother, and they're a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So, and again, just sort of that, because, Mrs. Tyler is sort of steeped in that because she, does know the old ways and stuff. But I just like the average guy that Jack was, just going through and it's like, wow, well, He seems all a bit crazy, you know?
Yeah.
He's just going around just kind of doing what he's told.
Also, just they slipped in that thing about the people with second sight, the people who can, read the tarot cards and all that, are people who have lived next to one of these temporal rifts, because it affects the way that they perceive reality. So that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, and if I remember correctly, I think that concept is reused later. I want to say with the Ninth Doctor, actually, because there's an episode. I think it's Eccleston's third episode. He goes back in time and he meets Charles Dickens, actually, and there's ghosts, just because that's hilarious. And the ghosts basically come through this rift in time, and I think one of the characters is more sensitive to that stuff because she grew up there. So yeah, I see, and I'm wondering now if he referenced something like this, if he referenced like the Fendahl incident like specifically, but I wouldn't have caught it because I was, that was episode 3 of Modern Doctor Who. I didn't know anything.
Yeah.
Barely knew who the Doctor was at that point. So, but that's a great episode, definitely. So yeah, this whole thing of the fissure in time, granting that sort of power is very interesting. Now, was that also part of the reason why Thea was chosen as the host, basically, for the Fendahl, or was that just because she happened to lock on?
That, I think the Doctor made something about how the Fendahl was a female originally, and that's locked onto her simply because she was the one female out of the 4 scientists there.
Yeah, so... because I also remember Style also saying something about, like, I've been watching you for months preparing for this, so... but yeah. And yeah, we had the whole thing of the Fendahl trying to recreate itself and absorbing life energy, which was interesting. It's a very interesting species, because, yeah, it's like Colby said, it's like, this doesn't really behave like life forms normally do. There's no real life form out there that thrives on life energy, even from its own species. Yeah. So, but that's what made it dangerous enough for the Time Lords to put a stop to it.
Yeah.
But they're weak to salt, which is kind of like, I guess it was really just the Fendaline that were more weak to salt than anything else.
And again, this is really weird. You probably know that. You've heard probably that if you have a garden, or if you have caterpillars and slugs and snails and things like that, one of the things that you do is you sprinkle salt around your garden, because that, I can't remember if it actually kills bugs like that or if it just gets them away. And these bugs definitely were slug-like, and so killing them with salt, or immobilizing them with salt, just seemed to be, again, common knowledge from gardening.
Yeah, well, and it could also be because they talk about the Fendahl sort of possibly messing with the evolution of man. I suppose it's entirely possible it could have messed with the evolution of other things on Earth, other life. So, because it's also, the Doctor said, it's probably the origin of, throwing salt over your shoulder. So, it could be something like that. It seems odd because it's, the sort of superstitious things like, salt, or if you had like silver or something like that. But I guess it's just, it is literally, because we made the reference to Pyramid of Mars earlier, where it's like, these aliens became the Egyptian gods in their mythology. It's literally just that the Fendahl have influenced this sort of superstition or evolutionary line on Earth after all these years. It's just that nobody ever knew it. So yeah. So that was interesting, and it was nice that they just shot things. That was always nice, Of course, then the other things that were shot, first was Fendelman dying, which it's interesting that they cut back and actually show his body, which, it was just, a little bit of, red liquid. It wasn't like a very gruesome, very graphic sort of thing, but just showing that with the entry wound, and it's like, that's pretty hardcore, honestly. So, and I'm sure there's going to be someone saying it's like, oh, well, it's not really hardcore and British. Well, in America, where every especially on TV and especially for kids, they are very cautious about that stuff. If anybody has watched an anime dub from the early 2000s, you will know how cautious and how protective the American television networks are of children. They've gotten better. They've certainly gotten better in recent years, but yeah, that would have never shown on a kid's show. Yeah. So, or the implication that, but pretty much just showing Style kill himself before he was taken. So,
I thought maybe Style would try to shoot at the skull. To try to get himself out of it, but I guess because the doctor said that it wouldn't really have an effect, and he said earlier. So I was wrong about if you get a decently sized textbook, you can't just crush the skull because it's too strong, which is a shame because I remember like 1,000 textbooks I used to have in school, and it's like you could probably crack a skull with this thing. So, man, those. Just thinking about those textbooks, my back hurts just from carrying them for years. So, but yeah. So, all in all, very good, very interesting story. I liked it. Yeah.
And even though, yes, the episode is going to go out in November, still works out because we're recording this on the 30th. So, a happy late Halloween at this point. Yeah. So, but yeah, that's pretty much all I got.
What's up next?
Next up is the Sunmakers.
Okay.
Well, I hope there is somebody who makes a sun. Because at the very least, there was an image of a Fendahl in this one. Yeah. So you got to give it that credit. So,
and that could have... I mean, I realize image of the Fendahl is very striking. You could have just called it the Fendahl. It would have been just as good.
Yeah, or... I mean, and I don't want to encourage using the very generic titles, but even if you, on a lot of these titles, if you went with, like, Terror of the Blank, it would work, because I remember someone, and I don't think they were really, like, giving me crap about it, but someone jokingly says, like, Alex probably would have preferred if the towns of Wang Chiang was called the Muffins of Wang Chiang. And I was like, well, yes, there were muffins. There were no talons in that episode, so At least that's something,
Yeah.
So, but yeah, image of the Fendahl, I'll give that one a pass. Sunmakers, TBD, to be decided.
We had Mythmakers back during the first Doctor.
That's true. Yeah, so...
we shall see.
Yeah, we shall see. You got anything else?
No, I got nothing.
Then that is pretty much it. With all that being said, we're Alex and Dad from 7th Hour Films, and we will see you guys next time. Take care. Alright guys, thanks for watching this video. There's a bunch of links on screen if you want to go click around any of those. There's a playlist for all of our Doctor Who classic reactions, as well as another playlist for all of my modern Doctor Who reactions if you want to go check those out. There's also a subscribe button and a Patreon button on screen, as well as other links in the description if you want to go check out any of those. See you guys later.